Hi, in today's video I'll be showing you how, using a couple of reference images from Google, I 3D modeled and designed the Mandalorian's pulse rifle. This was a really fun project and it was the largest and most detailed thing I've ever 3D modeled. I had a lot of fun making it and I hope you have a good time watching it. Thank you.
Okay, so opening up Fusion 360, here's the completed model that I finished. This is currently the 23rd version of the model, and the one I made is a little less accurate, and it's actually the 17th version of the model. So you can see all the key details, and it took about 100 different sketches to get it. I started designing this model with this one canvas. Preferably I would use one from the top and the side, but since I only had the side view, I had to guess the thickness for each of the main body parts, and I used the diameter of the barrels as reference. So here's the sketch I made that the main body is based off of. All of these were then extruded out and contoured so that it gave the body its signature look. As you can see here, there's some indexing pins that have been added to connect to the stock and to connect to the forward chamber. Here's what the main body of the gun looks like with the forward chamber added, and now these parts are ready to be sent over to the printer and made into real life. This was only my second time using my new large printer, and I hadn't quite dialed in the build plate temperature settings yet, so it was a real pain to get off. But now that it's off, I need to remove all of the support material to reveal the body itself. And here's the body in all its glory. All of the pieces that were printed out of PLA plastic need to get covered with a sandable filler. So I used a product called Fine Finish and brushed it all over the surface and then sanded it all off. This removes all the pesky layer lines and helps smooth out the surface.
The smaller parts were printed on my Ender 3 out of ABS, so they can just be sanded straight off the bed. A little bit of Bondo is added in the overhang areas to clean them up. After the filler is sanded away, they are then sprayed with filler primer, sanded again, and then sprayed with a regular primer. For the main body of the gun, I went with a dark iron spray paint. I didn't really like how it turned out, and in the future I'll just use a regular black spray paint and then weather it from there to look more like metal. For the barrel pieces, I traced the outlines and the center line of the barrel, and then used the revolve tool to create cylinders. The diameter of the barrel I modeled very closely matched a PVC pipe outer diameter, so that was used for added strength, and a steel rod was used for the gas return tube. So here's the scope mount and center barrel grip. These were cylinders with a hole for the barrel, and several prototypes of these were made to get the perfect fit between them and the barrel. The settings on this printer are dialed in, so they just come right off. Here are the rest of the barrel pieces ready to be printed and then painted. Every part is then primed and painted its respective color. If the part is going to be gold or chrome, a gloss black coat is applied to back the gold or chrome. The Taser Fork was printed on my larger printer out of PLA. and then painted chrome, but I forgot to record any footage of it being painted. This is actually my first time ever using the airbrush, and I was using all-clad clear gloss over the entire model. This stuff is also really stinky, so make sure you have good ventilation and you're wearing a mask. All of the highlight details were painted by hand with a brighter metal finish. Since recording this video, I've gotten way better at making a chrome finish using the airbrush as well, and you'll see some of that in my future videos. So now I've 3D printed the body of the gun, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. And while some of the other pieces are printing, I figured instead of 3D printing the stock, I might as well make it out of some scrap wood. So this here's piece of scrap pine that was laying around the shop, and I think it'll make a perfect stock for this gun. So I'm gonna have to glue this up to double the thickness, and then we should be ready to go. The piece of pine I have is not quite thick enough to be the stock on its own, so I need to mill it down to half its final thickness and then glue 2 pieces of it together. Here I'm just cutting my board roughly in half for glue up. The stock pattern is traced onto the wood and then cut out on the bandsaw. I'm being sure to take my time here and stay outside the black line, as well as not put too much stress on the blade. I probably should have cut a couple more relief cuts before doing this part of the stock, but I learned my lesson and did them for the top. The outside profile is finalized on the belt sander, as well as the connection point to the 3D printed part. In my reference photos, it was hard to tell how much of a flat was left on the stock, so I started by rounding over all the corners with the router to take off a good amount of material. After rounding over the corners with the router, they were then further rounded with the pneumatic palm sander. With the reference I had, it was hard to tell how big the flats were on the stock, and after finding new reference after this was made, they turned out to be too flat. So if I do another one in the future, I'll remove some more of the flat and make it more curved. I use files to roughen the shape of the grip and even further round over the corners. So now I'm back in the wood shop with all the parts fully painted and laid out in front of me. So now my next step is to do the glue up and do the final finishing on the stock. So to assemble it all, I'm going to use 5-minute epoxy, and I'm going to brush it in between all of the surfaces for a good bond. So let's start. Make sure you have a good assistant ready to help when needed. Now it's time to make the stock look a little more like the show. And to do this, I'm going to use a water-based stain to darken it, and I'll be using a paper towel to apply that. This color wound up being a little too dark, so I sanded it back with steel wool and then hit it with a red mahogany stain that turned out perfect. So now that the body's all glued up and the stock has been stained and finished, it's time to attach them. So currently the way it's going to be attached is just with epoxy across these two surfaces. But in future, I'm going to update the model so that there's a more mechanical connection. And I've seen other reference photos where the body actually extends and connects to the stock with screws. So in my next version, I'm going to update it and it's going to be a little more accurate. So let's add the epoxy now. I was worried about scratching the paint, so I used the smallest clamp I could find, and somehow it actually worked. So now that the gun's fully assembled, it's time to make it look dirty and make it look a little more accurate. I don't have all of my paints I have in my house at my disposal, but I do have this dark gray house paint that I'm going to thin down with a little bit of water and use that to dirty this up and give it a nice effect. I hope you enjoyed following my build process, and if you enjoyed the video, leave a comment and like down below. If you want to see anything else like this, leave a comment on any suggestions, and I should have a couple more videos like this coming out soon. Thank you.